Okay, it's going to be a review of Unforgiven 2008. This is actually the last Unforgiven. The very next year, I think they did Breaking Point. They tried to make it more of a submission specialty pay per view, gimmick pay per view, and then they kind of switched to Night of Champions after that. So yeah, this is the very last Unforgiven, and it's funny. This definitely felt like a gimmick pay per view because of the scrambles. They had three different scrambles on the show. I mean, they probably should have called the show Scramble Madness, which is actually a Ring of Honor show from 2002. But you know, there were some things on the show that really fit the theme of Unforgiven. I think Shawn and Jericho. I think this is the absolute height of their feud in terms of tension, in terms of the build and the storytelling. And then at the same time, the Punk and Orton stuff. I think if they had went back to it, that definitely kind of continued the trend of Unforgiven with what Orton did to Punk on the show. But yeah, you get three scramble matches on the show. So we're going to go back to September 7th, 2008. This is actually from Cleveland, Ohio, the Quicken Loans Arena, home of LeBron James. Actually, LeBron's first MVP season was the 08-09 season. You almost forget about that. And just want to shout out Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose just announced his retirement. Yeah, I always wish, that Derrick Rose run in Cleveland could have worked out. But obviously he got injured quite early in that season. Okay, we have an attendance of 8,707. So yeah, pretty lackluster, turnout for the show in terms of ticket sales. And then we get a pay-per-view buy rate of 211,000 buys, pretty much on par with the previous Unforgiven. There's not that big of a jump or decline. But yeah, man, let's get right into it. Before we get underway with the actual show, this is a weird show. I think it's definitely a memorable show. It's memorable for a lot of negative reasons. And then, it totally depends on who you're a fan of here. If you're a Punk fan, it's got to be a nightmare. If you're a Jericho fan, finally, Jericho wins the championship back after years of just, Jericho just kind of being stuck, underneath Triple H and all the Evolution days. And, maybe the initial return was a little bit disappointing. But yeah, I mean, credit Y2J and Chris Jericho for, getting back to the mountaintop. I think that there's a lot of similarities here compared to Vengeance 2001 and this show in 2008. I think, I think a lot of people look back at both shows kind of negatively, but in a way, when I look back at these Jericho title wins in terms of those two shows, I just think Jericho was really rewarded for the amazing year that he had in 2001. I mean, say what you want about the night that he won the title. But hey, I mean, you really wanted to reward Jericho for the amazing work he did in '01 and then in 2008 too, for just reinventing himself and for just this heel character just catching fire. It was so good that, Vince just said, Jericho Michaels needs the title because it's such a good feud that we got to put the title on Jericho because it was going that well. So in some ways, I agree with Vince for doing it. I think it did, deserve the championship. It deserved that extra boost of momentum that I think this show gave the feud. But at the same time, sadly, it comes at CM Punk's expense. And, if it came at Big Show's expense or JBL's expense or Kane's expense, nobody would give a shit. People will look back at the show like, oh man, they finally give it back to Jericho, man. The good days are back. Y2J wins the championship again, finally. But you know what, man? Because it came at Punk's expense, so if you're a Punk fan, you look back at this kind of negatively. I just think this is just a side effect of the Money in the Bank stuff. I mean, when Punk won, the Money in the Bank and then he cashed in, the initial moment was good, but I think over time, if you're not sold on giving someone like Punk the belt, like why did you even give him the belt to begin with? And it's funny, man. I can't really remember the summer of 2008 that well, so I can't tell you if Punk was a total fluke as champion, as Randy Orton pointed out. I just remember, he feuded with Kane, he feuded with JBL. The feuds weren't bad, but I really can't remember if it was so bad to the point where they just needed to take the belt off of Punk without him even losing the belt. It really, really is sad. It's a horrible way to lose the belt. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's almost embarrassing, when you look back on it. But in a way, the way that Jericho won here, it definitely fit, the way the storyline was going. It definitely fit because of, how brutal the Unsanctioned match was. And, it's almost like Jericho gets the last laugh without even having to do anything. I think Michael Cole even alluded to it, like no effort at all with Jericho actually, winning the way he did on this night. But, yeah, it's a very polarizing show. It's tough for me too because I'm a huge Jericho fan and I'm a huge Punk fan. You could really flip a coin between who I prefer over both of them. I would say in terms of just WWE stuff, I think I would pick Jericho. If you're going to ask me like whose run was better, Punk's run in ROH or Jericho's run in AEW, I would easily go with Punk's stuff in ROH. Who had the better run in AEW, Punk or Jericho? I'd probably go with Punk. But then if you're going to ask me, like, would you prefer Punk's ROH stuff over Jericho's WWE stuff? I might have to go with Punk on that. That's a tough one. It really is a tough one. I think I prefer Jericho '01 over anything Punk's done, though. I just want to make that clear. So it's a tough one, man. I love both guys. This was just a nice little learning experience for Punk. The fact that he was able to be champion on Raw while Triple H is taking a backseat on SmackDown. And I do want to point this out. I think it's really, really funny, too, how, both times Jericho got a big moment like this. The first time in 2001, Triple H was injured. He was supposed to make it back for that show, actually. He was promoted on the show, but he didn't make it back. So Jericho ends up winning. And then fast forward to this show, Triple H is on the show, but he's on SmackDown. So I always thought it was kind of funny that whenever Triple H was out of the picture, it really opened the door up for Jericho to carry the ball. Okay, so the rules of the Scramble matches, I just want to explain the rules really quickly. I think it's pretty easy. They're 20-minute. Each and every Scramble match is 20 minutes. You start off with two wrestlers. Every 5 minutes, another guy comes down. It almost has like a Royal Rumble type feel to it. And, the goal is to pin somebody and last a whole 20 minutes without, if you get a pinfall, the goal is to not get pinned the rest of the match. And in the history books, if you do score a pinfall, you're just the current champion. You're not officially crowned champion in the history books until the time limit expires. So if you're lucky enough to score a pin, the object is to break up anybody from pinning somebody else or to keep yourself from getting pinned the rest of the match. It's a little bit tougher to explain than the rules actually are, but we're going to get right down to it. So for the ECW championship, we got Mark Henry. Mark Henry's actually the champion here, taking on Matt Hardy, Chavo Guerrero, Finlay, and The Miz. Before we get going here, I just want to read what happened here in terms of the pins. So it was pretty entertaining. It's actually a pretty entertaining concept. I think this is one of those matches that if you just watch it, live, it's pretty interesting, while it's going on, if you're not going to get spoiled by it. So Chavo actually gets the first pinfall with the frog splash. Matt Hardy pins Chavo with the side effect. Then when Mark Henry comes out, he gets a pinfall over Chavo Guerrero with the World's Strongest Slam. Finlay comes out last with Hornswoggle. He's able to pin Matt Hardy with the Celtic Cross. Matt Hardy's able to pin The Miz with the Twist of Fate. And Matt was able to hang on and win the ECW championship. The ending of this match is really just about Matt Hardy just trying to, keep everybody from pinning him and just trying to keep guys from getting a pinfall. So yeah, a pretty good moment for Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy finally wins a singles championship. Pretty entertaining match. I'm not going to say it was great. I think Henry played his role pretty nicely. Henry, when Henry came out, it just looked like this big, massive bowl that was going to go through everybody. But, Hardy did a good job of trying to stay away from Henry. And, even when Finlay came out, you had to really stay on your A game, to stay away from Finlay's ring psychology and his smarts. So there was a lot of good stuff here. I think the Miz looked a little bit green. Some of his strikes on Mark Henry just looked, very developmental-esque. Chavo was okay in there. It's not a bad mix of talent. So Matt Hardy finally champion, but it's the ECW championship. It is what it is, man. There are times where, I've said, I just can't see Matt Hardy win the belt. Like, if you were going to ask me in 2001, could you see Hardy being champion, with how competitive, the roster was at that time? I just couldn't see it back in '01. When you get to '03, when you get to '05, maybe he had some moments there. But at this point, hey, man, it was better than nothing. It kind of sets up a little bit of that jealousy angle with Jeff going for a much bigger and more decorated championship. Okay, next up, we got an underrated match right here. We got, Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase of Priceless at the time. I guess they were calling themselves. This is the show where they aligned themselves with Randy Orton. They were involved in the beatdown on Punk, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, they're taking on Cryme Tyme, JTD and Chad Gaspard for the tag team championships. I'm not a huge Cryme Tyme fan. I will say this. I think the match was fun. It definitely did deliver. Cryme Tyme didn't get a huge pop, but, they did get into them, for the hot tags. And as the match progressed, it was pretty damn good. I think this had good action. I think you had a smart performance by Cody and Ted. The reversal on the small package, behind the referee's back was, pretty good stuff. So Cody and Ted win, kind of a cheap way to win, but, they were celebrating. They got all in Cryme Tyme's face and were kind of mocking them. And, then Cryme Tyme kind of beats them up. And then, Alpha's son comes out and saves them. So it looked like Alpha's son was going to, be a huge part of this stable with Randy Orton. I don't think it ever was really, much of a long-term thing. But, Cody and Ted come up to Randy Orton and they'd say, "Did you see what we did? We defended the tag team titles." And Orton's really not that impressed. He said, "Yeah, Cryme Tyme's great. They learn how to fight in the street, but, that really isn't that impressive." So, bottom line is Orton is unimpressed, basically kind of buries the tag division by, acting like, it was kind of acting kind of nonchalant about, Cody and Teddy's big victory right there. Okay, next up we got Shawn Michaels taking on Chris Jericho. This is a unsanctioned match. So, the last time Shawn Michaels was in one of these, it was his comeback match in 2002. It was, the build was amazing. Everything was amazing about that match. The performance, the video package, the aftermath. So yeah, I think when you compare it to that match, it's a little bit underwhelming. It's definitely the highlight of the Michaels Jericho feud in 2008 in terms of, I think this was the highest the tension ever was. This whole build between, what happened at SummerSlam and then leading up to this show. Shawn's performance from a promo standpoint and from an acting standpoint was tremendous, and Jericho was just great at just playing the bitter, just such a bitter, heel at this time. And the Unforgiven theme was definitely appropriate, for this match. Jericho did some evil things to Shawn. He threw him through the Geritron 5000. He injured his eye at the Great American Bash, or kept working over the injured eye from that shot on the highlight reel. And then, he injured Shawn Michaels' wife, Rebecca, at SummerSlam, where he punched her in the lip by accident. But still, Shawn was, spending every single pay-per-view at the hospitals, time and time again, and was just out for revenge. So, what I forgot about this match was that Shawn had a torn tricep. Initially, it was reported that, maybe Shawn wasn't going to be able to wrestle on this show, but, he was able to suck it up and get through it. And, after the match was over, you didn't really hear much about the injury. So I guess it was a partially torn tricep. And, when you watch this, they get plenty of time. They get almost a half hour out there. And, I don't know. I think if Shawn was not injured, maybe this would have been a little bit more back and forth. If I get when I watch this back now, I get the feeling that they definitely, worked around the injury. It was very one-sided. This is just a ass-kicking contest by Shawn on Jericho here. There's really not a lot of back and forth in terms of Jericho getting any offense. I think he might have hit like the walls of Jericho, and Shawn actually countered it by taking out a fire extinguisher just to break it up. I mean, really, that's it. There's really not a lot of offense from Jericho here. It's just a beatdown from Michaels, but it's a great performance. Shawn, just delivered some great punches here. He worked the crowd beautifully. There was some just incredible table bumps. Even when Shawn went through the tables, his celebration really kept the fans engaged. He destroyed Jericho here. He had his jeans on, he had the belt on. So that gave him the green light to, whip Jericho with his belt. Jericho had these whelps all over his back. Even the next night on Raw, you could see there was like 3 or 4 just huge, just whelps on Jericho's back, and you could see all the whips from the belt. I mean, it looked pretty nasty, but yeah, man, entertaining match. Jericho, went through hell here. He took a couple of table bumps. The elbow drop to Lance Cade and Jericho through the table came off great. And the ending, it looked like Shawn was going to lock on a crossface or a submission hold. He basically just wraps up Jericho in the belt, and he just starts giving him left-handed punches. And the referee has to call for a stoppage. The ref is trying to get Shawn to stop, punching Jericho, and then Shawn just super kicks the ref. But yeah, I got to say, the crowd was hot for Shawn. They wanted to see him get revenge. I wish Jericho could have, made a little bit more out of this. It's a tough match to rate though, because it's very, very one-sided, but it is long, and it is, there's definitely like a lot of like holy shit moments here, and it's got a red hot atmosphere. I definitely think this is the match of the night. It's definitely the one match in the. I just feel like the feud reached a boiling point by this point, and I just feel like this is where they climaxed in terms of the tension, in terms of just everything. But when you see the way the rest of the show played out, it almost made sense that Jericho, got his ass kicked here and didn't get a lot of offense in, because, Jericho's defense was, it was an unsanctioned match. So that means that the match didn't really count. And what does Shawn Michaels essentially, gain by beating me here? And the answer is nothing, because he's not the one that walked away out of the building with the world title. So it's a good story. In a lot of ways, it's a little bit similar to the SummerSlam match with Triple H, where, Shawn gets the victory. But who walked out of the ring? It was Triple H with the sledgehammer shot, and Michaels had to be wheeled away in an ambulance, or by a stretcher. So it's definitely a good story. It definitely perfectly sets up how they booked the ending of this show when you really think about it. But the Lance Cade stuff I really didn't care for, but yeah, it just seemed like everybody used Lance Cade as a protege, from Austin to Coach to Jericho. Yeah, I just don't know if Lance Cade was ever able to take that next step. But hey, no matter how you look at it, it's definitely not the best Jericho and Michaels match. But I do think, like, in terms of build and tension, this is the height of anything they've ever done together in terms of just being excited for a match between both guys. Okay, next we have the WWE Championship match. This is the SmackDown portion of the WWE Championship Scrambles. We got Triple H taking on the Brian Kendrick, aka Spanky. Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy steals the show. I got to say, Jeff Hardy is the MVP of this whole show, in my opinion. We got MVP Montel Vontavious Porter, who just debuted in AEW the other night. And then we got Shelton Benjamin, the gold standard, who's actually the United States champion. So you actually start off with Shelton and Jeff a little bit slow, a little bit slow in the beginning. I think Jeff really wanted to pace himself. So, when you see Jeff and Shelton, to get the green light to open up the show, you would just expect like a lot of, whisper in the winds, a lot of, leapfrogs and stuff like that. But no, they pretty much just kept it simple, and they kind of lost the crowd, I thought, in the beginning here. Let's talk about the Brian Kendrick. I think he had a good performance here, man. He looked in good shape. He had a new gimmick. He had he invented like his own dance that Jeff actually kind of mocked him a little bit here. MVP had an okay performance. I was never crazy about MVP in the ring. But I think he looked pretty good here, man. I mean, they did some impressive stuff. The ending here is something to behold here. So when Triple H came out, it felt like he was just going to squash everybody. So Triple H, there's a lot of people that look at this match and say, oh, Triple H squashed a whole bunch of mid-carders here. That's what it kind of felt like. But, you can't expect Triple H to lose in a match like this. It's just not good business. So I agree with Triple H going over, but I will say this. If you listen very closely, you can hear a lot of the fans starting to turn on Triple H, especially when he stole the pedigree from Jeff, when he actually got momentum and was the current champion. You can see a lot of the fans started to turn on him there. He actually pedigreed Brian Kendrick and pinned him, I think, twice in this match. Ended up getting his third pin on MVP right before the time limit expired. But I'll tell you what, there was a moment in this match where Hardy was the current champion, and he's just swantoning and whisper in the winding the shit out of everybody here just to keep everybody away. It was a great performance. I mean, you could just feel Jeff gaining momentum on this thing, and the fans wanted it here. And there is another sequence where Triple H is about to pedigree Jeff. Jeff actually backdrops Triple H out of the ring, and it just kind of felt like time was running out. But Triple H is able to pedigree MVP right before the time limit expired. Jeff actually had a chance to break it up, but instead he tried to pin, I believe, Shelton and or the Brian Kendrick, and it just time just ran out on Jeff, and Triple H was able to get that last pedigree like right before the time limit expired. So good performance by Triple H. I think he looked in good shape here. I think he definitely looked like he was in a nice rhythm. So there's mixed feelings on this championship reign on SmackDown. I remember True Slayer was really happy, when Edge came back and they finally got it off of him at Survivor Series. And then other guys have said, when you look back at this Triple H title reign on SmackDown, it's pretty damn good. I think the best thing about it was it just opened the door up for at least you give Punk a chance on Raw during the summer. Like, I have no idea if the summer of 2008 is a legit candidate to be, even labeled the summer of Punk. Nobody calls the summer of 2008 the summer of Punk, even though Punk was champion almost the whole summer. So I don't know how good it was or bad it was. I just don't remember it that well. I just don't. I mean, I hate to admit it, but yeah, I don't know. I think Triple H on SmackDown, it's something that hadn't really been done before. And, I think he did make the championship credible. I don't know. I just don't like the way, Triple H was booked heading into WrestleMania season, though. I just feel like if you're going to have him go into WrestleMania as champion, why did you even put the belt on Edge? But then you would have never gotten Jeff Hardy to win the belt at the end of 2008. So I guess that's the silver lining of it, but hey. Okay, next up for the WWE Divas Championship, you got Michelle McCool, pinning Maryse in about 5 minutes. It just wasn't good. The crowd got a little bit restless during this. I just think this was a bad mix of women. It was just a bad combination because I think Michelle is still, trying to learn at this time, and Maryse is just strictly eye candy. I don't even know if she wanted to wrestle, but it just didn't turn out that good. This just kind of backs up my point of, my gut feeling is that, 08 is definitely a bad year, from women's wrestling. Okay, next up, the main event for the World Championship. This is the Raw Scramble match. We get, so CM Punk is unable to defend the belt. He does not come out. There's an interview with Punk being interviewed by Eve Torres, and Punk is, motivated to prove people wrong. And then Randy Orton interrupts him. He says, maybe your chances would be a lot higher if the guy holding the belt wasn't an absolute fluke. And then Punk is a little bit, annoyed that Orton's there. And, Punk is adamant that he's going to, prove people wrong. And then all of a sudden, CM Punk is actually attacked by Cody and Teddy and then Alpha's son. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Kofi actually tries to make the save. So you almost forget about that. Kofi Kingston tries to save CM Punk, but to no avail. Randy actually punts CM Punk right in the head, and he just screams, "No, right there, right there." Now that was impressive. I got to say this about the Punk and Orton stuff. It definitely seemed like there was a lot of tension there, like real life tension. Orton is actually out with an injury. Let's just make that point. From my recollection, he had the last man standing match with Triple H at, I think it was called One Night Stand, Extreme Rules One Night Stand. And I think he separated his shoulder on one of those bumps. And I think Orton is still not cleared to wrestle. He looked very skinny. It makes sense. He probably wasn't allowed to lift weights, with the bad shoulder. But definitely, I think this was definitely a time where, Randy didn't want to lose that spot. He did the segment with Punk, right before Unforgiven. And, I think Randy at the time just wanted to naturally, get back into the mix. I don't think he, saw Punk as a main eventer at the time. And, he was using the word fluke. It just definitely felt to me like, he wanted to see Punk fail. So, I think in real life, these two guys have, made up. I think they're good friends now. I think there were like some backstage incidents, back in the day. But I think, they actually uploaded a watch along of their WrestleMania match. And it definitely seems like they're a lot more relaxed now, and they could just look back on everything a lot more positively. I just think they're not competing, for money now. The way the WWE used to pay guys, I think even back then, the money wasn't always, not all the money was guaranteed. There was a downside guarantee plus incentives. So if you kept on main eventing of WrestleMania, you would get that much more money. And I just think Orton at the time, I just remember he was adamant that when he came back, he did not want to get injured. He did not want to lose any money because he made a lot of investments in houses and property. So I think whatever tension was there, it just felt really, really real. I think at the time, maybe Orton was a little bit, paranoid that Punk could potentially take his spot. I know even Orton admitted that, down the road, that he felt like Punk was actually better than him on the mic and just really good on the stick. So, I'm sure he did see, Punk as a threat for as much as, in the storyline here, he tried to explain it like Punk is an absolute fluke. And, when you do something like this and when you talk down to a champion like that and they don't even get the chance to lose the belt, I think it made Punk look weak. I think, the silver lining is, at least they gave Punk another chance to win the Money in the Bank as a heel. And I think that was a much better experience for Punk. But, just the way this was done, I think that the worst part about it is eventually they did go back to it. It just took a long time. You had to wait until WrestleMania 27 in 2011 for them to, go back, to Punk and Orton. And, Punk actually did, bring this, this spot up or this storyline up in the build to that, this Unforgiven 2008 backstage incident. I don't know. I just wish it could have been followed up sooner. Cause I think, the Punk and Orton dynamic, I think it would have been a much better alternative, for what we got at WrestleMania 25. But hey man, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. So Punk is not going to defend the belt. He's not going to come out. So it's Batista, Kane, JBL, Rey Mysterio. Jericho shockingly comes out last, but it actually starts out with Batista and JBL, of all people, continuing their fabulous chemistry from the Great American Bash. I think it was okay. I think Batista worked hard out there. I'm not going to say Batista phoned it in. It's not a sexy mix of guys to start this match because Kane comes out next. If you do like big men, moving around and, a lot of lethargy and a lot of clotheslines and just a lot of big men just trying to chop each other down. It's not the worst thing in the world. I actually thought all these guys, busted their ass, even though it didn't look pretty. Believe it or not, Kane is actually the first one to get a pinfall here. He actually gets the pinfall on JBL. Right before the match ends, Batista gets a spine buster on Kane. So I wanted to make that point. So even before Jericho wins this thing, Batista is actually the current champion, at least for a little bit. But let's talk about Mysterio. I think Ray really, earned his money here. I think as soon as Mysterio came out, it just gave it that extra, dimension that it was missing. I think at the time Batista and Ray were friends, so they're actually doing double team moves where Mysterio's doing frog splashes off of Batista's shoulders, and then there's a sequence here where Ray actually, actually hurricanranas Batista out of nowhere, and Batista doesn't expect it. Eventually, Batista would turn on Ray, but I think that was a year later at the end of 2009. So it kind of set the stage for that. So, Jericho comes out last. There's still 5 minutes remaining when Jericho comes out. So, there really wasn't much for him to do. I think he gets speared by Batista and just kind of sells it for like 5 minutes. So right before the time limit expires, Batista actually catches Ray and looks like he's going to kind of powerbomb him onto JBL. But, Kane is still selling the spine buster from Batista, and Jericho just crawls over him before the time limit expires. He beats Batista to the punch. Jericho wins the belt. Batista just looks shocked and is, stunned. So Jericho effortlessly wins the championship here. I gotta say, man, I was happy for Jericho more than anything. It's just, even when you go back to 2004 and even 2005, the Evolution days, even 2003, I hated the fact that Jericho was never involved in the championship picture. It felt like Triple H just dominated that picture for so long, and Jericho was just underneath them like time and time again. So I was just happy that Jericho reinvented himself and was just rewarded, for all the great storylines and the feud with Michaels and, won the championship here. I was just really happy for him. It's sad that, it was taken away from Punk, but hey, it just wasn't Punk's time yet. And this is just a negative side effect of Money in the Banks. Like, people just don't look at them like they should be champion long term. It's not just Randy Orton. I just think everybody, and I don't think anybody in their right mind saw Punk as, oh, this is the champion of the company, even though he's on Raw. I don't think anybody looked at it that way. But hey, I would agree with Vince though. I think Jericho Michaels needed the belt. The one knock against giving Jericho the belt, just for the feud with Michaels is, Michaels has stated time and time again that he doesn't want the championship. Even Jericho said, like, he doesn't need the championship to be, relevant, which I kind of agree with. But, you always want guys to strive to be the best and to strive to keep the championships. But, just the way the Jericho Michaels thing was going, it just sounded too good. It sounded too sexy. Jericho Michaels, No Mercy ladder match for the championship. How could you pass that up? I even ordered it on a crappy laptop that was unwatchable, and I still spent the $40 on it. So I'm not going to say it made me excited. There's no doubt about it. If they kept the championship on Punk, I don't know. I seriously doubt I would have ordered No Mercy or just threw money away on No Mercy. So let me make that point right there. But, man, what else did I want to say? Oh, yeah, let me just say this about Jericho's reign right here. I was happy for him. But overall, the way they booked Jericho here, they still fucked him over. They still did. I hated the fact that he lost the belt back to Batista. Then Batista had to drop it back to him in the cage match. I was just like, what was the point of that? I think the argument was that because Austin was the guest ref for Cyber Sunday, it wouldn't have made sense for Austin to reward, reward the championship to a heel after the match is over. So it's kind of a lame excuse right there. And then I just, it's the same thing. The same reason as to why they put the belt on Jericho in 2001. It's the same reason here, because you're setting up a big return. In 2002 was Triple H at WrestleMania, and then in 2008 it was Cena at Survivor Series. So it's a little bit of like history repeating itself. Ideally, I think Jericho was so hot at the time in terms of promos as a heel, in terms of his heel work. I definitely would have kept him champion until WrestleMania, and I think that's where you do Jericho Cena at WrestleMania. Instead, I forgot about it, man. They did that whole storyline with Big Show and Vicky in the triple threat with Edge, which I think was a mistake. But yeah, I even forgot to talk about it. They actually do an Undertaker Big Show segment here. It looks like Vicky is upset at Big Show, and it looks like Taker wants to get his revenge on Vicky, and then Big Show turns heel. I actually looked it up. It was actually for the 71st time where Big Show turns heel on Undertaker. It's a turn that you could have seen coming. The whole segment just dragged. It dragged big time. It brought the show down big time. I guess the point is you could have done it on SmackDown, but I think it was the first time you saw Undertaker since SummerSlam, so maybe you could get some more buys if you do it this way. Just promote the fact that Taker is going to, come back at Unforgiven to, follow up on Vicky. Wasn't a big fan of it. I think this actually led to some good matches between Big Show and Taker, but this whole segment was just horrible. It actually went on right before the main event. Forgot to talk about it because they don't list it on Wikipedia. But I'll just end it right there, man. That's Unforgiven 2008. I gotta say, I think this was a fun show. I think it was fun. There's certain things. The Punk stuff is going to drive people crazy when they overthink it. But I think if you don't overthink the pay-per-view, I just think it's a pretty fun show. And the way Jericho won this thing, it definitely made sense with the way the unsanctioned match went. Shawn actually goes home to his family, and but Jericho stays, and he's the one that gets the last laugh. He's the one that walked out of the building while Shawn Michaels essentially, walked away with nothing, because an unsanctioned match, technically doesn't count. So I love Jericho's follow-up promo on Raw. It definitely made a lot of sense when you do think about it. But I'll just end it right there, man. That's Unforgiven 2008. Look out for a top 20, 25 Unforgiven matches with some pay-per-view themes. Should be coming within the next couple of days before September's over. Should be a really, really fun list to put together. And I'm out, all right?